What have I done to myself? What have I done to myself? What have I done to myself? How do I get away with this pain? It's killing me. It's burning me. It's burning me. I'm finished. I'm finished.
2 weeks had passed, and Annabelle's nightmare only deepened. The bleeding would not stop. It came like a river that never runs dry. For many hours, day and night, each time she tried to rest, the pain would jolt her awake. A cruel reminder of the path she had chosen. A once bright world had turned into a dark, suffocating pit of regrets and despair. The abysmal world haunted her. There is no cure. Those 4 words, set like a dagger, lodged deep into her chest. Every time she thought about them, her body shook with fear. Annabelle was once the envy of many. She lived in a mansion that sparkled under the sun, drove the most expensive cars in town, and wore clothes that made her look like Gruyere. But now, none of those things mattered. The same words she had pursued so desperately had brought her nothing but misery. Her friends, Tola and Cynthia, were her only comforts. In these dark days, they visited her almost every day, sitting by her side and tried to cheer her up. But no amount of kind words or gentle hugs could erase the suffering Annabelle felt deep in her soul. "I wish you could stop blaming yourself," Tola said softly one evening as she handed Annabelle a glass of water. "She is right," Cynthia added. "What is done is done. All you can do now is pray and hope for a miracle." But their words only made Annabelle cry harder. She knew their hearts were in the right place, but they did not understand. Her words hit Tola and Cynthia like a dagger to the heart. They could not hold back their tears, watching their best friend suffer with no way to help her. Annabelle cried uncontrollably, the regret in her voice breaking their spirits even further. After what felt like an eternity of sobs and silence, Tola finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Annabelle, we need to tell your parents. Maybe there is something they can do. We cannot just watch you die like this, Annabelle. It's not right." Annabelle shook her head violently. Her tears flew in even faster. "No, I cannot face them. They warn me. They beg me to stay away from this kind of lifestyle. If they see me like this, I know they will not accept me." Annabelle, thinking, said gently, kneeling beside her, "This is not just about you anymore. Your parents deserve to know. Maybe they can find help where we cannot. You need them now more than ever." Annabelle buried her face in her arms, her heart pounding. She thought of seeing her parents again, of admitting her failure, and facing their disappointment. Faith unbearable, but she could not ignore the truth. In her friend's words, she was running out of time, and if there was even the slightest chance they could help her, she had to take it. After a long pause, she nodded weakly. "Okay, but I cannot be the one to tell them." "I cannot, please. You two go and talk to them first." "We will," Tola promised. She placed a comforting hand on Anabel's shoulder. "First thing tomorrow morning," Cynthia heard it. "You are not alone in this, Annabelle. We will be with you every step of the way." That evening, Tola and Cynthia left Annabel's house, their hearts heavy with worry. The cold night air did lead you to calm their rage. As they walked to Cynthia's car park, a few streets away, "She is worse than I thought," Cynthia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tola nodded, biting her lips to keep herself from crying again. "We cannot waste any time. Our parents need to know, and they need to know now." They sat in silence. During the drive to Tola's apartment, both lost in thoughts, the weight of the situation pressing down on them like a dark cloud. "We have to be careful how we take them," Tola said finally. "They have already lost so much. This will crush them." "I know," Cynthia replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "But what choice do we have?" It was 5 a.m. the following morning when Tola and Cynthia dressed up and made their way to Anabel's parents' house. The streets were still quiet, with only the faint crowing of roosters and the occasional barking of dogs breaking the silence. When they arrived, they found Mrs. Adebayo, Annabelle's mother, tying a wrapper tightly around her waist as she prepared to head to the market. She was arranging her vegetables in baskets, her hands moving swiftly, and skillfully despised the early hours. She looked up in surprise when she saw Tola and Cynthia standing at the gate. What are you girls doing here so early? Is everything okay?
Her voice carried a mist of curiosity and concern, but there was also an older tone of warmth as she had always been fond of her daughter's friends.
Good morning, Mama, Cynthia greeted, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced at Tola, hoping she would take the lead. Tola stepped forward, hesitantly. Mama, we need to talk to you. It is about Annabelle. Mrs. Adebayo's hand paused. Mine motioned. Annabelle, what about her? Where is she? She is not well, Mama, Tola said, choosing her words carefully. Not well? Mrs. Adebayo's brow furrowed deeply. How bad is it? Why has she not told me? Cynthia looked down, unable to make Mrs. Adebayo's pleasing gaze. Mama, that is why we are here. Annabelle has been very sick for some time now, she said softly. Mrs. Adebayo's eyes widened in shock. She dropped the basket she was holding and wiped her hand on her wrapper. What do you mean, very sick? How long has this been going on? What is wrong with her? Tola hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Mama, it's complicated. She did not want to worry you, but things have gotten worse. She needs you, Mama. Worse. What could be worse than hiding her sickness from her own parents? Mrs. Adebayo's voice began to rise, but it was tinged with worry rather than anger. Mama, please, Cynthia interjected, her voice trembling. We can explain everything, but we need you to come with us, to see her. She is waiting for you. Mrs. Adebayo froze, the words hitting her like thunderbolts. The words seemed to stop as the truth sank in. She dropped the basket she was holding and fell to the ground, crying uncontrollably. What happened to my daughter? Where is she now? She wailed, her voice trembling with anguish. Donna lay beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. She is at her house, Mama. We came to tell you because we don't know what else to do, she said, her own voice cracking with emotion. Mrs. Adebayo's cries grow louder, a sob echoing through the compound. The thought of her daughter suffering alone was too much to bear. Guarding her strength, she wiped her tears and stood up, determination replacing her despair. She rushed into the house, calling us, her husband. Papa, Annabelle, wake up. We need to go. Mr. Adebayo emerged from the bedroom. He says groggy, with sleep. What is it, woman? Why are you shouting this early in the morning? He acts annoyed. It's Annabelle, Mrs. Adebayo said through her tears. She is sick, Papa Annabelle. Very sick. Her friends came to tell us just now. Mr. Adebayo's expression shifted from irritation to alarm. Sick? What kind of sickness? Where is she? She is at her house, Mrs. Adebayo replied, her voice breaking. We need to go to her now. Mr. Adebayo did not ask any more questions. He quickly threw on his shirt and sandals, grabbing the car key from the table. Let's go, he said firmly. His voice seemed with urgency. The family car, an old but reliable Toyota Corolla, spread through the quiet streets of the town. The atmosphere inside was heavy with tension and unspoken fears. Mrs. Adebayo clutching her rosary, muttering prayers under her breath. God, please save my daughter. Do not let anything happen to her, she whispered repeatedly, her fingers trembling as they moved over the beads. Mr. Adebayo kept his focus on the road, his jaw clenching tightly. He did not say much, but his eyes glistened with unshed tears. Betrayed the two more in his heart. Tola and Cynthia drove in their own car, their face pale and swollen. They exchanged worried glances but remained silent, knowing that words would not help. When they arrived at Annabelle's house, the atmosphere was eerily quiet. Tola and Cynthia led Mr. and Mrs. Adebayo to Annabelle's room. Their hearts pounding with a mist of fear and hope, they opened the door, and the sight before them was chilling. Annabelle lay on her bed, motionless, her frail body barely covered by the blanket. For a moment, everyone thought she was sleeping, but as they moved closer, the truth struck like a bolt of lightning. Angela was gone. Mrs. Adebayo let out a heart-wrenching scream that seemed to shake the very walls of the room. She rushed to her daughter's bedside, shaking her limp body. Annabelle, my child, wake up. Do not do this to me. Do not leave me, she wailed, her voice breaking with unbearable pain. She screamed down Mr. Adebayo's face. As he stood frozen, His heart shattered into a million pieces. He could not move. He could not speak. His vibrant, ambitious daughter, his pride and joy was no more. Paula and Cynthia clung to each other, their sobs feeding their hair. They had hoped to save their friend, to bring a family love as a beacon of hope, but they were too late. The grief in the room was suffocating, a heavy weight pressing down on everyone. Mrs. Adebayo cradled Annabelle's lifeless body, rocking her back and front, as if sheer weak power could bring her back. What did not seem fitting to us, Annabelle? Why did you let greed consume you? We could have faced anything together. Why, my child? A cry echoed through the house. Each word pierced the hearts of those present. Mr. Adebayo finally muttered, his strength to move. He knelt beside the bed, placing a trembling hand on his wife's shoulder. "She is gone," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "No!" Mrs. Adebayo cried, shaking her head violently. "She cannot be gone. She cannot leave us like this." Paula wiped her tears, strict face, her voice trembling. As she said, "Annabelle told us she regretted everything, Mama. She said she wished she had listened to you." She was sorry. Hearing those words broke something deep within Mrs. Adebayo, her words sorting into heart-wrenching. She sobs as she punched her daughter's hands. The news spread quickly. Neighbors and extended family members arrived, their face itched with shock and sorrow. Everyone had a story to tell about Anabel, once promising life, about the young woman who had let her ambition lead her astray. She was so full of life. One elderly neighbor said, shaking her head, "How could this happen?" Another added, "This is why our children must listen to us. Greed and shortcuts never end well." Adebayo, who became a hub of mourning, with friends and relatives coming to console the family, whispers of judgment circulated, blaming Annabelle for her choices. As Annabelle's lifeless body was buried, her wealth, her money, her cars, and designer's clothes remained behind, useless. She had sacrificed everything for riches, but lost her life in the process. Her story serves as a gentle reminder to those who heard it. The love of money, when unchecked, can lead to destruction. Hello everyone. If you listened to this very end, it means you enjoyed this story. The only way you can support and encourage me right now is by subscribing to this channel. Please, this will go a long way for me. Thank you so much as you subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification button so that whenever I upload a new story, you will always be notified. Thank you once now. Gracias.